Welcome. And thank you so much for joining us for our 4th annual Silicon Valley AAPI Civic Leadership Summit. We have a full program ahead of us, so to get us started on the right foot, we have Dr. Michael Chang of the Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute, who will lead us in a moment of meditation. Following that, Alici Tuluwa of One East Palo Alto and NHPI Data Policy Lab at UCLA will read our land acknowledgement. Dr. Chang, I pass it on to you.
I have been asked by the organizing committee to welcome everybody to our 4th annual Silicon Valley Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute Summit today. We have, as was mentioned, a great program for you. I just want to mention that we have a great organizing committee this year, including Asian Law Alliance, Asian Americans for Community Involvement, Lead Filipino, CL USA, Civic Leadership USA, One East Palo Alto, and Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute. Some of you are returning from previous years, joining us, welcome. And those of you that are new this year, also a very special welcome to you too. Please stay tuned for a really exciting program. This year we have lots of energy, lots of creativity in our programming, and so it's definitely worth participating and engaging in. There will be breakouts, and then don't forget at the end, we will actually have an in-person reception for you. So I hope you join us. So as to start off, I want to invite you to join me in just being quiet for a minute. Many of you have done meditation, both by yourself or institutionally with your organization or in your classroom or in your place of work. So we're going to just take 1 minute to kind of center ourselves, quiet ourselves, so that we can be fully here and participate during the summit. Again, a very warm welcome to you.
If you're overwhelmed and your mind is racing, let's take a moment to breathe. Take a slow breath and focus on the brook. Let your thoughts or distractions come and go without trying to control them. Allow your body to start relaxing. Notice the different colors of green in the forest and the sound of the water. Watch the water move over and around the rocks in its path. And look how it changes colors and form in the process. Listen to the birds in the trees. Take a slow breath and let it out slowly and gently. Bring yourself back to your surroundings.
Hifomai, Gilmo Faleni, Haelem Homafmafi, Aivi Hokelesi, Tohifo Ohange Hahau, Gilmo Atamai, Ongahi Kokelekere Tau, Ifunga Makani. Tulo watu, ki afio ai tai hamai I hotaulo totonga. Pete whakatulo watu heni, ki kere tapu o whai ai ngā weni, mohono kakai. Akina tolu me he muekma, aia oku tau no, te oku tau whakamoua I he nau tuunga moui. Whakatapa tuheni ki he kia kinau tolu, kau taki ngā aue, kau taki lotu. Mo kinau tolu koto ape oku nau kau mai I he e tau whakataha I he ahoni. Ofa ke hoko e tau whakatahani ko ngā aue aonga ke hoko atu aki ai tau popo I ho tau kakai. I'd like to pay our sacred acknowledgements, first and foremost, to the sacred lands that we are settlers on, to the Muecma people, those that are the first people of this land. We acknowledge that we are settlers here, and as immigrants from the Pacific who understand what it is to be Indigenous and the importance of sovereignty and self-determination, we are committed to learning, working, and supporting what our Indigenous siblings wish for themselves. I'd also like to pay my sacred acknowledgements to all of those that have paved the way, our elders, our leaders, that have allowed for us to do this work in supporting our community. I ask for your permission ahead of time for us to be able to do this work today, and I appreciate the opportunity to be with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Chang, and thank you, Ellina. So again, welcome. We're very happy to have you join us this wonderful Saturday morning. My name is Dorothy Huang, and I'm the Civic Engagement Supervising Attorney at Asian Law Alliance. So I'm sure many of us would have loved to sleep in this morning after a long and busy week, but I can assure you that you will leave the summit feeling more energized and refreshed. There is no amount of sleep that can take away the kind of exhaustion that I think most of us are feeling right now. The anxiety, the fear, and the anger that weigh heavily upon us and our communities cannot be whisked away with a pill or, frankly, even a 4-hour summit. But you all knew that when you joined this convening. You're all here to learn, to share, to find comfort, to commiserate, to be better equipped to face tomorrow. And as we gather AAPI leaders and future leaders in this space, we hope that this summit will be an opportunity to remind ourselves of who we are, where we are, what we are doing, and what we aspire to do. And this year, it's about the women. Women, AAPI women are everywhere, and they're phenomenal. Everything is a women's issue. Everything is an AAPI women's issue. There is no space in which AAPI women are not actively engaged as leaders, organizers, and change makers. Their voices are getting louder by the minute, and today we're here to listen. And on that note, I'd like to introduce our keynote speaker, Phi Nguyen. Phi is the Executive Director for Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta and was previously their Director of Litigation. In March 2021, AAPI communities across the country were shaken to the core by the Atlanta spa shootings, and that pain still lingers for many of us today. Now, just 1.5 years out, Asian Americans Advancing Justice Atlanta has since stayed the course with their mission to serve, educate, and empower, even in the wake of horrific tragedy in their backyard. We are honored to have Phi here with us today as a leader, a civil rights lawyer, a community organizer, a web series producer, and simply put, a woman on a mission. Please join me in welcoming Phi Nguyen.
Thank you so much, Dorothy, and good morning, everyone. Thank you for having me join you today. It is the summer of 2014. Michael Brown has recently been murdered by a police officer in the streets of Ferguson, Missouri. And I am sitting in a room in a historic building in downtown Atlanta, where my sister B is hosting a community conversation about race and racism in America. At the end of the night, one of the speakers and our friend, a young Black man named Timothy, closes out the conversation by making this ask of all of us in the room. Be bold and generous in using your power for change. That night marks a watershed moment in my journey to becoming Asian American. You see, I initially showed up to that conversation naively thinking that my only role was to help white people see how they could do better. Growing up in the city of Augusta, Georgia, I went through elementary and middle school as the only Asian American student in the entire school, besides my sisters. I was taught nothing about Asian American history. And for years, I thought of the story of race in America as a Black and white movie where Asian Americans were just extras. But what happens on that summer night in 2014 is that I was forced to turn the scope inward and to begin to grapple with what my role is and what our roles as Asian Americans and Pacific Islanders are in knitting together a multiracial community. What are our responsibilities and where do we belong? It is now March 16, 2021. 8 people, including 6 Asian women massage workers, have just been shot and killed by a white supremacist in Atlanta, Georgia. My phone starts buzzing with messages from all across the country. People ask, what are we going to do? In the days and weeks following the shootings, we focused in Atlanta on wrapping community care around the victims and their families. And during that time, our Black brothers and sisters, and especially our sisters, wrapped care around us. They publicly and unequivocally spoke out against anti-Asian violence, and they privately held our pain. They said, "We know how you feel. We understand your pain. We know all too well what it's like to have a white man murder people who look like you and then have the police and media sympathize with the killer. We understand your rage and we affirm your humanity." I share this with you today because I want to challenge us to continue to stay centered in our solidarity, in our interconnectedness with other communities as we grapple with violence, both interpersonal and systemic, against our AAPI communities. Because showing up for each other and being in relationship with each other doesn't mean that we uplift Black lives only when there is a highly visibilized act of violence against the Black community that grips our nation's attention. Solidarity, true solidarity, demands that we also see the interconnectedness between our communities when it is our Asian American community that suffers a horrific act of violence. It calls on us to resist rhetoric and solutions that may elevate the Asian American community while subjugating other Black and Brown communities. It requires us to expand our framework for how we think about and talk about anti-Asian violence. And expanding our framework doesn't only mean recognizing our intersectionality. It also means highlighting systemic and structural violence as much as we highlight interpersonal violence. Because I think we know violence against our community is more than targeted attacks perpetrated by a single racist actor. Our community also suffers from violence that is not as highly visible and that may not even be solely rooted in hate, like different forms of structural and state violence. I will never forget that the day before the SVAPI shootings in March of 2021, our community was grieving the deportation of 33 Vietnamese refugees back to a country that they fled many years ago before we had to quickly pivot to another type of violence. And in the days that followed the shootings, our governor of Georgia signed a massive voter suppression bill while standing under a painting of a plantation. So when we talk about violence against the Asian American community and how we address it, we have a responsibility and an obligation to talk about it honestly and expansively. Since the SVAPI shootings in 2021, I have been given a microphone and a stage more times than I ever have in my life. I have challenged myself each time to use my power boldly and generously. Last month, I was invited to the White House for the President's Summit on Hate-Fueled Violence. I was asked to speak on a panel about the Atlanta community's response to the SVAPI shootings. I decided beforehand that I would use part of my time on stage to highlight state violence against our community and to call on the federal government to do better. I thoroughly prepped my lines the day before. I knew exactly when and how I was going to pivot to talking about the deportation of Vietnamese refugees. I warned my board chair that I was probably going to use my invitation to the White House to call out the federal government just a little bit. I was ready. But when I got there and I was sitting up on that stage with bright lights shining down on me and staring out at a sea of government leaders, there were a few seconds when I almost lost my nerve. But I didn't. And if I had, I probably wouldn't be telling you this story. But I know that my decision to challenge the federal government that day did not on its own make much of an impact. But I do believe that change will happen and can only happen through millions of small decisions like that one I made, that are made by each and every one of us to be bold and to be generous with our power at every chance that we get. Thank you again for having me today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Phi. I think I speak on behalf of the entire organizing team and all of the attendees representing, a vast San Jose, Silicon Valley region. I think I speak for all of us when I express our immense gratitude to have you join, all the way from Georgia, tapping in here to share your insights, to be vulnerable with us, and to share your personal story and how that connects to today's theme of AAPI Women Looking Forward. Again, thank you so much for your opening words. We are so grateful, and we look forward to continuing our partnership and our relationship with you in advancing justice. Well, hello, everyone. I am Jel Cortez, and I am with Lead Filipino. A pleasure to be here and to see a lot of familiar folks on the line. We know that virtual events and conferences are definitely, all I'm trying to say is thank you for being here when you could be anywhere else on your splendid Saturday morning. But this is our 4th annual AAPI Civic Leadership Summit. And as you heard from, Phi, our opening keynote speaker, as well as Dorothy and Dr. Chang, today is about amplifying the movement and grassroots leadership and campaigns of larger implication around social justice and racial equity, and how Asian American Pacific Islander communities organize and coalesce together to tackle some of these large issues that we know are impacting our society today. But I'm here representing Lead Filipino, as you can tell from my background, but we are a San Jose-based nonprofit that organizes for civic participation and culturally responsive programs. And I have the pleasure this morning of interviewing our next guest speaker in sort of an exclusive special interview, and that is with our guest, Ellina Yin. Ellina, they is a first-generation Cambodian-American multidisciplinary social practice artist, community organizer, and civic innovator, born and raised in San Jose, California, on Muwekma Ohlone lands. I will add Eastside San Jose just for extra detail there. What's up, Eastside San Jose? And just to, further proclaim today's theme of AAPI Women Looking Forward, I just want to say we're calling upon our divine feminine. We're calling upon our divine feminine to advocate, to challenge, and rise up against the hate and violence that we see targeting women today in our world, in our society. So Ellina and I have had a chance to talk at length about today's conference theme, about the relationship to civic engagement and defining what that means. And we're going to get right into that. So let's just jump right in. Sound good, Ellina?
Yes, and hopefully that car noise went away.
Oh, I don't think, okay, I did hear that. Actually, I did hear that, but no worries. It added to the, we're all in the elements here. But this might go without saying, Ellina, how do you define civic leadership, and how do you explain civics to those that are not as familiar with this hidden world? And everyone, Ellina will be able to share more about what she does. I feel like my introduction to Ellina was very like slim in comparison to all that she does in community, but I hope to help pull that out in, you know, the next 30 minutes with you.
Thank you, Jel, and I'm really humbled to be at this panel and like at this conference. It's really important to me to be within community, and so I would define civic leadership is where you come to engage with the laws that shape your lived reality, your autonomy, and your quest for sovereignty. And, you know, for those of you who've ever negotiated a promotion or a raise, you know, you're engaging with a set of rules to get more resources for yourself, and is essentially kind of the same thing. There are many rules in local government that are nowhere to be found in K through 12 or sometimes even universities. So it can be a little overwhelming, but that's why we have great, you know, community organizations like yourself and everybody that's here today. And so I would say the skill of engaging with the law is very transferable from like your public life and public meetings to private institutions and your job. And it's not easy work. It's very mundane, but it's incredibly powerful. I think civics is, you know, the cradle where everything is born from, how we live, where we live, what we learn. And it does have its rhythm and cycles. It's not 24 hours. And I would say that in local government, there can seem to be like a lot of things, a lot of moving parts, but it's all moving a little bit of like a slow motion speed because that's how local government does. And yeah, so that's essentially how I would describe it, is that you're engaging with the laws that shape your life, and you're trying to shape them in a way that is more equitable and more that serves everybody, not just the few.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I think that's an excellent, you know, explanation that breaks down a very complex, you know, set of, when we talk about laws and regulations and, you know, our own fight and our advocacy for sovereignty. I think you wrap that up in a way that's easily understood. And I definitely connect with the point that you said around sometimes it's boring, right? When we
Yes.
talk about civics and council meetings and rummaging through minutes. You know, we work with a lot of youth in Lead Filipino as well as all the conveners of today's conference. And I recall a member of our youth saying, you know, I didn't take this internship with you all just to, you know, create agendas and take minutes and make flyers. And I was like, you realize this is a teaching learning moment. You realize civics and organizing is like 90% logistics. So
Yes.
I
Mm-hmm.
hear you on that. Part of it is, you know, really uncovering this hidden world and making it real for people. But you are active in several civic spaces, girl. I mean, you are the creator of the Only an SJ podcast. Check that out, everyone. Only an SJ. She produces for the All in Motion podcast. I just got a notice that my internet connection is unstable. Hopefully I don't sound like a robot or I haven't dropped yet. Sorry, everyone. My computer just told me my internet's unstable. Perfect timing. But Ellina is also the co-founder of Local Color SJ. So all those beautiful murals that you see across the city in downtown San Jose, Ellina was a part of that founding team. A board member with Catalyze SV, project manager of the Asian American Pacific Islander Oral Activist Project for Santa Clara County, which is where I met you. And most recently, a co-author for Local Measure I, which is appearing on our ballots right now in the city of San Jose as we speak. So from podcasts, civics to art and movement, Ellina, I would like to ask, what influences your work, especially your civic and community-based work?
Yes, thank you for that. And I just want to also build upon what you were sharing about your intern. And it is mundane work, and it's almost kind of like doing your chores and doing your laundry. That's kind of another aspect of civic space, but it's really important because when you have no clean clothes and food in the fridge, you can have a really bad day. So I am a very systemics focused person. When I work on problems, I like to get to the root cause. And the reason I chose to focus on civic spaces and lawmaking and legislation is because that's where we go to write, you know, visions of the future. That's where we go to envision new futures. And When I teach about law and policy, I usually start off with the concept of magic. And I like to use The Little Mermaid as an example. When, Ursula has Ariel sign that contract in exchange for, her voice for a pair of legs, which is also illegal because she's a minor and it's an exchange of body parts. But you can also think of that as like an NDA. It's a non-disclosure agreement, a favorite among big corporations. And from that piece of paper, a new reality is born. Aside from the glitter and the fairy dust, law works very similarly. Someone thought about and wrote the Chinese Exclusion Act. Somebody thought about and wrote about Executive Order 9066. And literally overnight, the lives of those impacted by this new law changed forever. And a little known fact too is that the Jim Crow laws started on a local and state level, and then it moved its way through other states. And when I started looking into local government, it's just nowhere in our curriculum. And when I was first entering the space, I felt imposter syndrome. I felt like I didn't belong here. I didn't know what the rules were. I felt like an idiot, like trying to engage in this space that to me, I thought was just meant for lawyers and professionals and whatnot. But, that's where I started to realize local government is ground zero. And, that is systemic change. And what happened in 2020 really kind of, it opened and dissolved all of the systems that I once revered as like so hard to change, but overnight that also changed. We stopped all the transportation and all of like the movement around the globe. And an eye-opening moment for me was when people were like, oh, there's like dolphins in like the river, the James River in London, and like people can see the sky in India and China. And that gave me hope that if we are all on the same page and we're like working towards a direction together, we can make incredible movements together. And that is like my focus on the local level, because I'm not here to save the world or change the world. I can only impact my community. And the civic space within my community is where I can do that. And it's where I'm comfortable and it's where I was born and raised. And so that is definitely why I intentionally choose to focus on the very, very local city and county level of civic engagement.
So much there to, we're in a time limited space, but just to touch back upon, some of the points that you made and to raise them up here for everyone, the power of the local, and that we all have something to contribute when we look at our neighborhoods and our communities in which we live and reside and we make magical. You and I talked at length in our, past sessions as we were preparing for today about, really flipping that script, Matt, really honing in on our own individual magic as it relates to public service. And public service could look so many different ways to so many different folks. And for the audience out there today, whether or not you are that seasoned commissioner or you are looking to start your own campaign on campus about a social welfare issue or a topic, you want to start your own community-based organization, you're volunteering with an organization, there are so many pathways into this conversation of civics. And I relate entirely to you, Ellina, around just that power of the local. And what we're seeing today, really drawing on a lot of parallels. We're living through, take your pick in terms of unprecedented, unparalleled, never before seen, especially with some of our workshops later today focusing on, Roe v. Wade and the positioning of us needing to stand ready. You and I talked about the attacks on critical race theory, attacks on, with the overruling and the overturning of Roe v. Wade. There's just a lot here, and the responsibility that we have in our localities. So the last thing that you said, it really ties into this next question. And we talked a lot about imposter syndrome, and really that's our honing in on our magic, that we are that innovation in that room. That we are the only ones looking the way that we look, having our experiences, and we have something to say and something to add. So we promote and believe strongly in the ideal of seeing folks from our communities and our neighborhoods represented in spaces of impact, leadership, and decision making. In today's context, that's civics. actually that applies to everything, you know. Does your culture and identity shape your projects and initiatives? If yes, how so? If not, tell us more.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely does. I think I got my strong sense of community service from my my parents, who are from Cambodia, and they arrived here in the 80s after the Cambodian genocide. And in Cambodian culture, it's also, we're very collective. It's about the community. It's not very nuclear or insular to one individual. And I would say the incredible thing I realized recently, incredible and sad, is how unique the AAPI perspective is. You know, we only represent 6.2% of the American population. And I would say of the Cambodian Americans here in the US is less than 1%. And after the Cambodian genocide, we lost a third of our entire population. Among those, 80% were artists, and also 90% were doctors and medical practitioners. And if you just think about artists and, you know, caretakers and doctors, that's like a huge segment of our culture. You know, how we express ourselves, what is meaningful to us, what are our values, and how we take care of ourselves and our relationship with our bodies and the land. And, you know, Cambodia beforehand practiced animism. So we have a very different relationship that's much more similar to indigenous peoples and tribes here in the US. And I relate to that. And so I see myself as a culture bearer here, you know, representing my community. And there's nobody else that has my experience. There's nobody else usually in the room that grew up the way that I did, even though like East Side San Jose, it's still very different. And so that's given me a lot of confidence to kind of own my identity and own who I am, because when you think about imposter syndrome, is like, who am I trying to be? Like, I'm trying to, you know, imposter this kind of white space and be a white person when I'm not. And that's when I get that feeling. But when I own what I am actually trying to represent, which is a person of color, a woman of color, then, you know, I'm completely in a different headset and mindset, and it's a better space.
That's beautiful. You know that today's theme is, you know, AAPI Women looking forward, and, you know, really focusing on the elements of our role as community members, as advocates, especially around Stop Asian Hate, providing bystander training, policy recommendations and changes, the implications of Roe v. Wade being overturned. What does today's theme mean to you? Like, when we approached you, we invited you today to speak. We wanted you to, you know, hit upon AAPI Women looking forward. What are your reactions to that theme?
When I look around my community, I've been seeing AAPI Women really kind of entering the space for the first time. But when I look at their rap sheet, they've been here a really long time, and they have a lot of things that they've been doing, but they're kind of, for one reason or another, getting the spotlight. And when I look forward, what I see is that no one's going to come save us but ourselves. And we are the most adequate people to save ourselves, because we can tell them exactly what we need from the injustices that we've faced. And there's nobody more qualified than us to lead on the justice towards Stop Asian Hate. And I would say that in the beginning of my like civic space career, I spent a lot of time trying to convince people of my ideas and my visions and why I thought we should focus on boards and commissions or like this or that. And I never really got a lot of support. And I use that kind of like as an excuse to not do it. Like, okay, well, if nobody is approving, maybe it is a bad idea. Maybe I shouldn't do it. Maybe I should do something else. And it was when I made the decision of like, I'm just going to do it anyways, because no one else is covering this and I need to do this. And that's how I ended up, you know, in part here and being recognized for my work, was because once I started doing the work, people weren't really questioning it anymore. We weren't in that ideological space of like, you know, academia and like kind of, you know, what's your philosophy? And it was more about my work. And I would say for women, especially AAPI women, we're so smart, we're so resourceful, and we need to stop waiting for permission and even stop waiting for recognition. We just need to start doing what, you know, we are intuiting, what we're feeling like must be done. And, you know, start those companies, become the CEO, and like, you know, do your film projects, do your art projects, do everything, because post 2020, we live in such wild times. I see what's going on, and like 2020 really changed my life. I also, you know, suffered a few deaths in that year. So it was really life changing for me when I was entering into like the Charter Review Commission, which is like our city constitution. I was like, what's more root and systemic than starting at our constitution? And I was in there giving fiery speeches and like kind of sounding like the crazy lady in public comment. But persistently, I showed up every single day, well, not every single day, but every single meeting. Within 2021, there was like over 90 hours of public meetings, and more than the planning commission. And I showed up every single meeting and I spoke 2 minutes at a time. I wasn't even on the commission. I just kind of spoke. And then commissioners started reaching out to me. They even called me in to present about civic engagement. And I got to advocate for things that I believe in, which was like a climate commission. I wanted land acknowledgements. I wanted, you know, gender inclusivity. And a lot of the things that I advocated for are, parts of it are in Measure I. Other parts of it are, you know, hopefully coming up in 2024, because yeah, it wasn't going to be like I got my dream proposals, like every single one, because they proposed like over 20 recommendations. And that gave me a lot of faith in you just got to do it. And if it fails, you'll learn and you'll keep going. But not doing it just leaves you in that purgatory of like question, and like it's not a good place mentally either.
I'm sure you're speaking right to the core to a lot of folks on the line here. You know, we have a number of individuals, you know, Dr. Chang that opened up today's session, you know, the founder of AAPI, the Asian Pacific American Leadership Institute. You know, we have Richard Kondo, who's, you know, been leading the Asian Law Alliance out of Santa Clara County for several decades, just these advocates and these founders, and that, you know, celebration of AAPI Women, and really raising up that message of we need to see ourselves in those roles. And, you know, I'll even stretch that to just the larger AAPI community. I think Phi really said it in a way in her keynote at the start of, she saw AAPIs as like the extras. And that hit me. I was like, wow, I hadn't, that's the first I've heard it in such terms. And it was really, it like punctuated, it was poignant. And the importance of these spaces to not only spread the knowledge of commissions and just the many ways to get involved is essential. And we need to encourage each other. We need to gas one another up, because I was in the same boat as you, especially with starting Lead Filipino. I was going to elders and asking for permission, wondering if this concept was useful. And it wasn't until we just started throwing events and doing things and folks were reacting to that, that we took flight. And there's just a lot of power in that piece too, of the answers right here, right? The answers right there. And I'd love for you, we didn't really plan this part out, but something tells me you'll be ready to respond to it. Can you talk, can you talk a bit about Measure I?
Yeah. So Measure I changes 4 things. And one of the things is that it elevates our ethics commission to a city constitution level, because before it was in the municipal code, and in the municipal code, council can change it anytime they want. And so I see that as being really important, because now this commission has more power to hold elected people accountable. I don't know if anybody's been watching like Kenneth Mejia in LA. I love his campaign, and I love his just like basic data visualizations of how to keep money accountable and people accountable. And so, and this commission doesn't just hold accountability, it also teaches, because a lot of the violations that you see from our public officials, like they didn't fill out their form right. And so, this would enable them to have workshops like, this is how you fill out your Form 700 disclosures. This is how you do your filing if you want to be a mayor or a council member. So it can also teach the public about, if you want to run for office, this is how you do it. They would become like the library of knowledge for that. So that is important. And 2 is it establishes and requires City Council to adopt equity values and assessments in all of their policymaking. And so next year, if this passes next budget year, we can say the Constitution says that you have to consider equity. And how are you assessing your policies to make sure that it's not inequitably impacting different parts of San Jose? So having that in the Constitution gives us, that legal magical power to, to hold them accountable and make sure that they follow through on all their campaign promises. And we remove all gender pronouns. I think that was very simple. And I also lifted that from the Youth Bill of Rights. So that was actually put forth by the Youth Commission in the city of San Jose. And I know this is like AAPI Women lead, but I also want to like uplift our queer and trans LGBTQIA community, because it's about all of us and we can't leave anybody behind. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about the AAPI community, is that we really do practice the value of inclusion, and we're working to partner with other communities. And then the last thing, it removes citizenship requirements for boards and commissions. And that is just, the state of California has already removed that. And so now we're following suit, kind of like when Roe v. Wade says it's up to the states. So like, Governor Newsom said, okay, now it's up to the cities, but the cities still have to go and do the paperwork and do like the agendas and adopt it. And so this is just adopting it into. And I would say that's really important, because when we think about the Planning Commission, which is only for citizens, and they make a lot of decisions like the flea market, there is nobody representing the flea market or the people who make a livelihood. And, all of the monies and dollars that they have generated for the city of San Jose, and now it's being wiped out, and it's being displaced. And what would that look like if we had undocumented and other people from different communities and perspectives on the Planning Commission? So that is like how that can shape the future forward. And so those are some of the 4 things that it changes, and I'm really excited about it because there was 23 people from all over San Jose that were on this commission. And sadly, I would say there was more, maybe like half a dozen people that participated, 6 to 12 people, sometimes 20 people every meeting. And you think about the population of San Jose, it's less than like 0.1%. But these 12 people, were persistent, and we worked together. I worked with the Real Coalition, I worked with Sacred Heart, I worked with Working Partnerships, and all of these different community organizers, and we were able to do it. And so now it's on the ballot, and we still can't get, I would say, the Facebook ads, because like it's so difficult now to do ads on Facebook. And so if you want to help share about Measure I, tell your friends, tell your family members. It's really, really important. And it's been called the feel good proposal, but I'm fine with that. I think we deserve to feel good after 2 years of this nonsense. And I can go on and on, but I'll leave it at there.
There are many things I admire about you, Ellina, just your style, your finesse, the types of work that you lead, the content that you put into the public's hands through Only an SJ and the All in Motion podcast. I want to go back and double click on some things that you said, and I'm also going to pull in other examples that you gave in past conversations. I want to bring it to everyone's hands right now as well. But that piece around language justice, right? Removing the pronouns, because you said that in the Charter Review Commission, or just even descriptions of commissions in the city of San Jose, correct me if I'm wrong, it was all he, him pronouns.
Yeah.
And what does that suggest to a member of the public, us non-binary folks? When we look at that, we're like, oh, is this like a role for just a gentleman, for a dude? That already in itself is sending a signal. And like subconsciously, we're not aware of it, but what does that do to us when we're looking and we're interested and want to serve? What does that do? So that's a very powerful piece. But something about you that I want to highlight for everyone on the line is how you talk about being self-taught, and being self-taught in regard to producing your podcasts,
Mhm.
to choosing one commission and committing to going to those meetings regularly. And you said it in our last meeting where you were like, I know I'm not like a movie producer or a filmmaker, but I know what movies I like and what movies I don't like. I know what types of podcasts I like and what I don't like. And that's you bringing your design background, right,
Yeah.
into now your passions. Can you speak a little bit more about being self-taught in civics? Because we have so many programs, civic leadership, civic engagement. For you, like your entrance into civics was very through your design lens, which I think
Mhm.
is very interesting. We need to talk about that a little more, I think.
Yeah. So I was a very fierce environmentalist as a teenager, and I wanted to go into a career that served that. And I ended up in water and wastewater construction. And I loved that job. And part of it was I worked in this like estimating department, and essentially what they do, and we worked in this room called the war room. And whatever the city wants to build, like this team of 4, including myself, we would figure out how many tons of concrete is needed, how much rebar is needed, how much dirt do we need to move, and how many men do we need, men and women do we need to work on these different projects at different phases. And it's all done through like spreadsheets. And so it's a lot of calculating and accounting. And then I would work with state, federal, and local institutions and cities and counties. And I just began to kind of see the process of how a city is built and how a community of residents is served. And I moved all the way from like engineering, still in water, wastewater treatment, and then I moved into architecture. And in architecture, we design like schools, libraries, and like whole entire master plans, like what's happening with like the Google campus. And like I'm very familiar with that concept. And how it's always been is that you have the architect and designers, they propose some pretty things, and the community comes in with their sticky dots and they just pick what they want. And I was like, that is such an underservice of community intelligence. And we have so much more to provide. And we've all walked into like a building that was poorly designed before, and like maybe you can't find your way around. That's design decisions. And we've all come across a street that we can't cross. That is a design decision. And the people who walk and live in those neighborhoods, in those streets, they have invaluable intelligence and data on what works and what doesn't work. And it's the government's job to extract that and work with them to design better cities and design, more healthy, thriving places. And throughout that career, I just always saw such a disservice to community engagement that it became my core focus, because I felt like if we could master community engagement and treat it with reverence and respect and really bring it into the design process, we could design the magical worlds that we all want to live in, where we can bike anywhere, we have shade, clean air, water. And so that was kind of, I approach everything from that design lens, knowing like from start to finish and how important the ideation phase is, and how that ideation phase doesn't typically include the community until after the fact. And that is, that's something that I hope to change. And in community, which is something that I can see happening in the Planning Commission or happening on a city level. Like the city of San Jose doesn't really have a community engagement policy that has been updated. I think it's like 1995 or something like that. And those are like those mundane rules that you can fix that really just changes everything. And so that is like how I approach, and that's and I didn't go to school for any of that. I just learned on the job. And I would credit that resilience and resourcefulness as how I grew up with my parents because they depended on me to translate for them. And so at a young age, I had to figure out, insurance forms and like how to pay a bill and like just help them with simple things or go to parent teacher conferences and translate between like my siblings, the teachers, and my parents. And so I had no choice but to figure it out, just like I feel like they had no choice but to figure out how to escape and arrive in America and take care of their family. So there's this mentality, I think, with first generation survivors of like, you just have to figure it out. There's like no other way um, except just going out there and like picking things up. And so thanks to the internet, thanks for the library. My dad was always very, if you can read and comprehend, you can learn anything. And so commit to your reading skills. And so I'm a very ferocious reader, and that's kind of how I approach my autodidact self-taught ways. And so kudos to my parents for really drilling that into me.
Yeah, I mean, your story and your openness to your willingness to share just that resiliency. And that to me is how I define real innovation, which is you throw every single hurdle, you throw every barrier, every challenge, and we rise up and we transcend. And I think that is really the gut. And that is the core of today's message, that we see ourselves in these systems, that we truly transform and engage in systems change to make this work community responsive, which doesn't mean the community is that afterthought. Community is that at the fore, at the beginning, and you really emphasize that for us today. So in closing, I wish we had more time, but I have two more questions for you. I'll put them together into one. You're super busy. When I was reading up about you, I was like, oh my gosh, I've counted like 10 different orgs and affiliations. I was like, I see myself in her. But let's talk about well-being and your wellness practices. Do you have a day off? I'm not trying to get into your business like that, but just what are your wellness practices, right? Because there's a full person there. How are you taking care of you? And then secondly, how can folks on the line stay updated with your, initiatives and projects that you're cooking up? How can we support?
Yes, so wellness. I spend a lot of time in nature. I'm a surfer as well, so I like to surf every now and then. I feel like the ocean always resets me. Also, this might not apply to all people because I'm childless and like living my best life. I don't have the serious responsibilities of raising kids. And so I would say every other month I would plan a backpacking trip. And for me, I have to be cut off from Wi-Fi, from like digital, like, and just be fully immersed in dirt and trees and so that really helps to reset my nervous system. And I have little things that I'm trying to like disengage from devices and kind of just be more intentional about when I need to be on the computer and when I need to turn it off. I hate alarms. I hate alarms. I do not use alarms. It took a while to train myself not to use alarms. But I wake up on my own. I just don't like being told what to do. I don't like an alarm, like it's time to get up and work. I don't like that. And so I don't use alarms. I try and get out into nature as much as I can and just take walks. And I spend time with my family. And so, because I'm the eldest and I do take care of my parents, they're aging. And so I still kind of go over there to cook with them. I'll take them to doctor's appointments and stuff like that. And so I reset with nature and family. And where you can find me is, I have it, I believe, in my handle, only in SJ, is my Twitter handle, Instagram handle, and it's also only in sj.org. So you can reach me there. And my personal is On a Little Rampage, and it's LIL. And that was my AIM screen name from when I was 12 years old. It kind of just stuck. And that's where you can find some personal musings, but I'm not really I don't know what's going to happen with Twitter. It's in a whole thing right now. I was never really engaged with it in the first place, but I don't know what's going to happen there.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'd like to just, point out that you have a lot of love in the chat. I know that you probably haven't been scrolling through. We have a request to know your skincare routine as well. But a lot of love in there. I'll read one from our girl, Carmen Brammer. Thank you, Ellina. I am so touched by your story and filled with a more hopeful spirit, knowing that you're so deeply engaged in community betterment. We have a message from Nyakoshin, I can't see the rest, Williams. Love that. Reset the nervous system, embodying awareness and living. Thank you so much for, we have one more from Anna Ruth Hernandez. This is my first time getting to hear about Ellina, and from them, I am now a fan. Thank you so much for your presence. So in closing, Ellina, thank you for moving things around to be here with us live and in the flesh on the Zoom room. We know that you are incredibly busy, so we are deeply honored that you could spend some of your morning with us in this, deep topic around AAPI Women looking forward and civic engagement. And we look forward to supporting your future work and, putting more initiatives on the ballot. Sounds
Yes,
good, right?
let's do that. Oh, and join a border commission or just attend a meeting. You don't even have to be on the commission to make a difference. You can just attend the meeting regularly.
Yes. Yes. And then become that expert in the room where the commissioners are now like, hey, do you want to come speak and, join this session with us? That's awesome. Well, thank you so much, Ellina. We'll talk to you soon.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. It was such a pleasure.
Bye.
Great. Thank you so much, Jill. Thank you so much, Ellina. That was amazing. I feel pumped, and I'm sure many of us feel the same way. That was wonderful. Thank you again. Real women, real work, real change. This is fantastic. We'll be showing a short compilation of videos from our youth, our present, and our future. So please stick around to watch that as well. And we also have a video about Measure I, which Ellina just discussed.
Hello, my name is Tasha Take, and I'm a junior at Cappuccino High School. To me, a good leader is someone who can collaborate with others and really just bring people together. I'd say one of the most important qualities of a leader is being a good communicator, and really being able to express complex ideas as something simpler and comprehensible for everyone.
Hi, my name is Serafina and I go to Castellia School. To me, being a leader is more than just a position or a title held. It also means being a compassionate listener, a courageous advocate, and a forger of community relationships. Through prioritizing people, a constant commitment to growth and learning and relearning and seeking out multiple perspectives.
Hi, I'm Teresa Lorenaquino, and I'm a Santa Clara University alumni, and I'm currently pursuing my master's in library and information sciences at San Jose State. To me, being a leader means to act with intention and to put serving your community at the forefront. I hope that by being a leader, I can help the community continue to become a safe space. It should be a space where everyone feels comfortable enough to grow, to learn, to make mistakes, to basically just be ourselves. Because as leaders, I also think that we should be comfortable with the idea of being replaced. Because while the person in the position may change, the work will always persist.
I'd say representation is a very important thing. There are very few Japanese people in my community, so I honestly feel very excited whenever I hear about someone or see someone who I share that culture with in the media or just in my community. And, it's really just a feeling of assurance and pride when I see these people. And, this feeling is really not limited to myself. And I think it's really important for young children. It's really important to feel connected to your community. So a very powerful way to do this is through representation and that connection that it brings. Thanks.
Representation is especially important to me because it's hard to be what you can't see. And I need more mentors and role models and leaders and all kinds of different people that look like me so that I can learn to continue a tradition of forging ahead and opening doors and paving paths for those right behind me. We need more systems and policy and media that is built to include AAPI faces and voices, and is also woven together by all of those that it affects.
When I see someone that looks like me or has similar experiences to me in the media or government, my first thought is usually, whoa, cool. But when I really stop and think about it, what I'm looking at is someone who is speaking what's essentially my voice, who's sharing what's essentially my perspective. And as minorities, our voices are diminished far too often. So it's really important that we as API continue to take up these spaces that are also typically white dominated.